is Getting Answers, Western Mass News.
Good Sunday morning. Good to have you with us on Western Mass News Getting Answers. I'm Dave Mattson. You know, each and every week we focus on the issues and events in Western Massachusetts with the newsmakers and the people who are making a difference. My guest this week, and we welcome him back, Hampden District State Senator John Velis. Welcome home.
Good to be back, my friend.
We're going to talk more about that, but about your deployment.
Really good to be back, sitting down with you, seeing everybody. I appreciate you.
You look good.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
After a stint down on the southern border, but we'll talk about that a little later. But there's a lot to talk about going on here, and you know, one of the things, and we focused a couple of programs on this about community leaders who've said insurance and school costs and state mandates and inflexible fiscal caps are creating a severe financial crisis for cities and towns. Called a perfect storm by the Mass Municipal Association. Is it time to revisit some of these mandates and work with city and town leaders to try to ease that crunch?
So the answer is a resounding yes, but let me set the table a little bit here. One of the things that I love to do when I go into one of the schools in my district, I'll say to them, what is the difference, in your opinion, between the federal government and then state and local government? And they'll all kind of look at me and I'll say, well, imagine going to a grocery store. And if you are the federal government, you can use a credit card and buy whatever you want, and you can have this debt, and you can say we're going to pay it off in years down the road, later generations. But when you are the state and municipal government, you're going in with a debit card. Yeah. You can only spend what you have. So I think it's really important in laying this table a little bit to talk about some of the inherent restraints that both the state and the municipal governments have. We can only spend what we have. But to your question, again, a resounding yes. You know, one of the things that's probably the most painful part of my job is to sit across from municipal leaders just like this and hear about some of the challenges that we're facing. We're seeing Prop 2.5 overrides all throughout the state at unprecedented levels, debt exclusions across the state, all throughout. Absolutely proud of the fact, right, that the Senate has just this past year, starting with the budget, starting with the fair share amendment that we did. We've increased UGA, which is what municipalities really like. It's that unrestricted aid, unprecedented levels, and then Chapter 70. Chapter 70 is the real budget buster. That is the schools, and the Senate has elevated that, again, to an unprecedented level, really hoping it survives conference. But yeah, we can always do better. Many of the formulas, just take education, for example, the Student Opportunity Act was a really, really big deal. It's going to help just a significant number of students. But if I'm being honest, it's left many districts behind, right? It hasn't there hasn't been parity in how it impacts. So one of the things that I think is really important that we did in the Senate, part of the Student Opportunity Act said we need to review this foundation budget. The foundation budget is how municipalities fund their schools, how we fund the municipalities. And we said, no, we're not going to wait for that 3 years to revamp this, to take a look at it. We're going to set this up now. We just did that in the budget. So Senate definitely trending in the right direction. Yeah. But to your point, and to many of my municipal leaders' friends' points, absolutely, we need to revisit much of this.
I mean, the fact is I know we've had overrides. Southampton just approved one at 1.9 billion. East Hampton the other day on Tuesday approving a 6.9 billion one by, and both of these votes are very, very close. That, yes, we're making these overrides and we're taking care of the problem now, but these are Band-Aid fixes more than anything else.
We like to say in the Army, this is the equivalent of putting a tourniquet on internal bleeding, right? It's going to give you temporarily relief, but you really need to dive into this. Let's look at some of these cost drivers, right? We hear over and over again, some of these weight loss drugs, so what they've done to the budget, a lot of these contract negotiations, a lot of what is happening. I think there's been a tendency to push things down the road at all levels of government. And what's happening right now, to quote you, is this perfect storm, this alignment of the stars, this confluence of factors that's all happening at once. Yeah. But what I would argue is that some instances, I would say this being one of them, it presents opportunities for state leaders to say, okay, we really need to revamp Chapter 70, Chapter 90, UGA, increase the funding. I think all folks have agency, though. I think the municipal leaders need to do the same thing. And I think the big gorilla in the room that we haven't talked about just yet, too, is I think it's really important to remember that Massachusetts, and let's be honest, it all trickles down from the federal government to the state and the local government. We're looking at it in excess of a $3 billion cut from the federal government. And if you go back to, we can only spend what we have, that's not money we can put on a credit card. We need to make up for that somehow. And a lot of times that's cuts.
Is it time for, well, maybe even the state and these local communities, we have to take a step back and look at how we're doing business. That stuff we were doing 40, 50 years ago probably doesn't work today, whether it's inflation or costs. I mean, you're talking, insurance, busing costs, all these things, costs that are fixed costs, and they're going up year after year after year.
Absolutely. I mean, I think any successful entity, right, whether it be corporate America, whether it be politics, whether it be the military, you need to look inward every now and again and conduct some inventory and introspection and say, hey, this isn't working anymore. This is antiquated. This is obsolete. One of my biggest hopes is that no one's going to accuse state government in Massachusetts or anywhere else of being nimble and being agile and responding just in a very adapting in a very tactical, swift way. It's just not something that's going to happen. And I think there's a lot of that just has to do with government. But we need to get faster. There are so many barriers that are out there. If we just plowed through them a little bit faster, we could solve a lot of these problems. The main one being housing, but I know we can.
Sure, we're going to talk more about that too. Well, $53 million in increase in the Senate as far as local aid. I know the Mass Municipal Association was calling for $351 million over a few years. Can the legislature do more, or again, with the lack of federal money coming in here, are they kind of at a crossroads?
I think we all have to do more, right? I think we all have to do more. One of the challenges that we face in Massachusetts, if you look at the $60 billion plus budget, 46% of that roughly is healthcare costs.
Yeah.
So we're looking at many of the same issues that our municipal partners are. But the Mass Municipal Association, they're right, they're correct. We need to do more. I mean, there is nothing that I hear more about from constituents, walking the streets, at the grocery store, at the gym, then what are we going to do? We can't afford this anymore. I'm on a fixed income. What about these potholes? What about these schools? Special education, circuit breaker funding. These are challenging issues. So yes, again, we have trending the right direction, but you're just not going to see that type of an increase overnight. But I think we need to get there. I don't disagree with the Municipal Association.
Well, the other part, too, is I know in East Hampton they're saying, look, we've got the override passed and it's taking care of one problem, but it's creating another problem. That we're squeezing senior citizens, many people, out of these homes they've lived in for years because they just can't afford the taxes anymore. Now, I know in East Hampton the mayor is looking for maybe possible ways to ease that, but again, it's a whole other problem it creates.
In many instances, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, I think is a way that I kind of look at that. And it is a challenge. And you just mentioned the senior citizens. You want to talk about a group, rightfully so, that we hear a lot from. And a lot of times there's on these votes, these Prop 2.5 votes, you'll hear a lot from, look, I am on fixed income. What might not matter to you as a proponent really does matter to me, and that actually does has an impact. Juxtapose that next to inflation, gas prices, the grocery store. Everywhere people go, they're getting hit. So we have to reconcile all of that in our minds. But again, we need to do more. And look, if you wanted to ask me, there's other portions of the budget that I think when we're making those hard choices, I think we need to get rid of some other things, or when I say get rid of, maybe less spending in certain areas and more in this local aid stuff, because this issue is not going away.
No.
The upward trend of Prop 2.5 overrides, the debt exclusions, that's going up. Again, presenting an opportunity because it's causing people in my line of work to say, whoa, we've got a perfect storm out there. And we're I would argue right now, trending the right way, going the right direction, but always can do more.
That's good to hear. I know we're nearing the end of the fiscal year. Lawmakers are in the midst of budget reconciliation. The Senate passing the $53.4 billion spending plan. What are the key provisions in that? And the other part of it is, will this thing get passed by the 1st of July?
In reverse order, that's the hope. We did it last year. I mean, I'm probably the wrong person to ask this, but I would say, let's lock folks in a room.
It can be done.
And you get an answer. You come out when this budget is done. I think it will be. Far be it from me to make conclusions in this line of work. I learned that when I first got elected rep. But that's the hope. And that's, it should be, right? Our taxpayers deserve that. And it's something that we should do. Some of what's in there, I mean, we've already talked about the record unprecedented breaking levels of local aid that's coming back. Is it enough? No. 46% of healthcare costs that are skyrocketing, which is after housing, the next big issue we need to tackle. And then there's just something that's really near and dear to my heart. millions upon millions of dollars for behavioral health. I can't go anywhere without that parent grabbing me, without that kid grabbing me and telling me, you know, we're struggling. We're struggling, and all these other factors are exacerbating it. So youth behavioral health, there's millions of dollars in there for. So there's a lot of commitment. I always like to say a budget is a statement of your values. And I think this is a really important budget. A lot of stuff for hunger, addiction, issues that are out there. And I would just also point out too, we hear loud and clear that people are struggling. That budget, that $60 billion excess of $60 billion budget, no new taxes and no new fees. And I think, again, that's something that matters right now when people are being hurt everywhere they go.
All right, time to take a break. More with Senator Velis when we come back. Welcome back. My guest this week is State Senator John Velis. I know you've renewed your push for insurances for the energy and water impacts of data centers. One proposed for Westfield. There's another one proposed in Holyoke. Let's talk about your concerns about them.
If you look at the landscape nationally, you could even take that further internationally right now, there's getting to be a recurring story. Data center comes in. And I would also even rewind a little bit, zoom out and say that data centers today are vastly different from 2 to 4 years ago when many folks hadn't even heard of them. They're coming in, the energy costs are skyrocketing, the environmental damage to water, all of the above. My concerns are that if data centers come in, any uptick in costs, and I tie this directly to something that's probably what's most paramount for me, an affordability agenda, is what that needs to be borne, not by the residents and the taxpayers, that needs to be by the company. Now, I think we need to take a further step back. The reality is this, is that AI, as much as we don't, right, we have challenges, we have concerns, and I think there's ways to address them, to power that, to address that. I think it's important that data centers, they're going to set up shop one way or the other. It's just whether it's Massachusetts, Westfield, Holyoke, or going more to Texas and going more. They're here. My thought is that if they are here, and if we accept that notion that they're going to be here, and I don't see any evidence that we can just say no, then I think we need to make sure that the residents, the taxpayers are well compensated. And in those contracts, between municipalities and these data centers, there is clear delineated language that says that if costs overrun our projections, that is not on the resident. And if that's not in the contract, you want to know what? Go back to it. Try to come up with a way to revisit it. Serious concerns.
The other question I have too is you were talking about Holyoke and Westfield. These are two communities with their own gas and electric companies. Is there a particular? You think there's a particular reason why they're looking at these communities?
I think both have to do with location. That's interesting because it's different. It's different in every single community. These data centers and the companies behind them, particularly the large ones, they know what they're doing. In fact, there was just an article the other day in the newspaper that Google, because nationally they're so far behind in data centers because people are awakening to these concerns. And this is actually something that concerns me too. They're just thinking of just buying all of the energy so they don't even have to go to the municipalities. Serious concern, energy costs, water, environment. We need to deal with this on the front end. So to our previous conversation, 5, 10 years from now when those bills are going out, people aren't saying, what is this? It needs to be dealt with now.
I'm going to circle back to, because you're one of the leading advocates for expanding youth behavioral health services. I want to talk about some of the major funding initiatives and policy changes you'd like to see made for mental health support in children and adolescents and make this care affordable and accessible.
So a couple things. I think 90% of school-age kids, where are they on a daily basis? Schools. I think if you're going to look at it, and this is probably not a good analogy, but we have a captive audience with kids in schools. That's where we need to address this. That is what we would call in the Army a force multiplier. We need to build up adjustment counselors. We need to build up guidance counselors. And you can talk to any number of kids and they'll tell you, I wanted to go see my counselor. I wanted to go see my adjustment counselor. And the line was so long. I had an issue I needed to deal with. I left. You talk to the counselors, they'll say the same thing. We just don't have the bandwidth. One thing that I'm very proud of and have led via the amendment process is there's a program called MCPAP that we modeled on after schools and pediatricians. Someone goes to the doctor, pediatrician says, oh, this child is struggling with some behavioral health things. Let me call a professional. So what we've modeled in the Massachusetts Senate via the amendment process is student goes to school, tries to see the adjustment counselor, can't see them. That adjustment counselor can pick up the phone and get that psychiatric help and get that student in an appointment, or might be able to help them walk through whatever's going through, talk them through whatever's going on. School-based behavioral health, we put in millions in the Senate. Just the list goes on and on and on. It is a commitment of the Senate president. It's certainly a commitment of mine. And the thought process is simple, right? If you deal with something early, there is a really good chance that you're going to prevent the downstream effects versus dealing with it. But I will say, we have what I like to call a cradle to grave behavioral health crisis right now. You're hearing it from older adults and you're hearing it from the youngest of young. We need to do everything. But again, if we start younger, that's going to have that trickle up effect. And that's really, really important. So school-based behavioral health, I think, is where it's at. You're going to hear about a primary care bill coming out of the Senate very, very soon, which, again, different topic, but I would argue they're all tied together, because if you ease up, like housing, if you ease up something here, it eases up and relieves a bottleneck over here. But school-based behavioral health really is where I think the investments need to be made.
And do it right now.
Do it right now.
All right. Take another break. More with Senator Velis when we come back. Last segment now with Senator John Velis. John, I want to talk about progress being made, the housing shortage. We touched on this in the first segment. Relief for some of the state's most vulnerable residents and making things more affordable and more accessible, again.
The biggest challenge in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is housing. We don't have enough inventory. It's too expensive. Talk to someone who's paying a rent right now. Talk to someone who's looking for a house right now. If we don't build more, I want to be very clear. There's other parts to this too, but to me, it's a basic economics 101. Demand far exceeds supply. We passed the Housing Affordability Act. That was a good start, but if you look up much of the legislation, there is still opposition to much of what the state is doing in terms of we need to build, build, build. We need to drive down those prices. If you look at the outward migration in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if you talk to someone who's thinking of buying a house, a lot of times they're not even beginning the process because it's so expensive. They're leaving. We need to build more. And we're probably getting to a point where to say that we need to be bold is an understatement. Right now, we are so far behind. And I think that, you know, we have a saying in politics, right? Using carrot and sticks. You see it in diplomacy, the military. At some point in time, if the status quo remains, I think you might see the state move from the carrots incentive to our friends in local government to the sticks. Because the reality is this. There is no separating housing from any other issue in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. If people are priced out and cannot afford to live here, they are going to leave here. I put this squarely in the category, is Massachusetts competitive? Can we be affordable? Can we be competitive? And if you don't have a place to live, right? I had the most heartbreaking conversation with a 5-year-old student. We were joking around, and she said to me, you know, that whole idea about getting a house with a white picket fence and
the American dream,
that's gone. Yeah. And it doesn't need to be the case. And a big part of that, if we're being honest, is a lot of the red tape to build, a lot of the financing that goes through that process, and the duration. Massachusetts takes too long to do everything. If you shave years off projects, the amount of time, the costs go down. I said one thing, and I'll end with this. As a state rep, I attended many groundbreakings. I attended a ribbon cutting the other day, the opening of a facility that took 9 years to build. Yeah. If it takes that long to build, that is no way we are not going to be able to get out of this housing crisis. Government, even in Massachusetts, needs to be more nimble and efficient.
Get rid of the red tape. All right. At the beginning, I welcomed you back because you have been, for those of you who don't know, 6 months deployment for the Guard at the southwestern border. Let's talk about that. Yeah. I know you can't talk about a lot of the deployment itself, but managing your Guard responsibilities and your job as a state Senate and a dad and a husband, too.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I guess in the reverse order, one of the things that was challenging for me, and this is the first time that I've deployed as a husband and a dad. And I had a FaceTime birthday for my kid's 4th birthday, and that was tough. That was tough. And thank God we have the technology, but I still obviously would have rather be there. Look, I love serving my country. I am a proud member of the Mass National Guard. The balance is a challenge, right? I firmly believe that it's something that, look, I say this all the time, less than 0.5% of this country serves. I view it as an honor to serve my country. Yeah, there is an impact on the family stuff. I will say this, from a legislative standpoint, and I think many of my colleagues, if they were sitting right here, would say this too, I've got the best staff in the entire State House. Mm-hmm. My staff is unbelievable. They carry the job on seamlessly. And then lastly, and you know what, other than the family, maybe most importantly, I had an opportunity to serve side by side with some of the most impressive individuals I've ever met. Folks from Massachusetts, New Mexico, Indiana, Pennsylvania. Many of these states fell under our command. And a couple things, proud to be American, proud to serve, and I just absolutely love it. And I know we're not talking about the mission, but I would just say one thing in a resounding fashion. Many elected officials use the issue of the border as a photo op. This was a phenomenal opportunity, and it's great to have this secure border.
Always good to see you.
See you, my friend.
Come back again. It's nice to have you back
all
home.
The time.
Senator John Velis, by the way, he has no one running against him this year, so we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's it for us. We'll see you next week.